Welcome to session 8. In order to prepare for this session on teaching listening, please talk about and consider the following questions. What are the objectives of students doing listening tasks in the classroom? What difficulties can students have with listening tasks in the classroom? Please consider the following points and discuss them with a colleague if possible. What do your students need to listen to in English? Why do they need to listen in English? What problems do you think your students have when listening in English? To answer this with complete accuracy, you will of course need to get to know your students first and make a learner profile. An important thing is to find out whether your students need English to communicate with non-native or native speakers. So, what can you do to help your students with listening skills? Think about this for a moment and discuss with colleagues if possible. There is an assumption in language learning that listening skills will develop automatically through exposure to the language and through practice during more tangible skills like speaking. It is therefore often a skill that is neglected by teachers. It is difficult to assess and monitor. How do you know if a student is good at listening? How do you help them improve? Possibly by suggesting they practice more. But the focus should rather be on approaches to listening and thinking about how the student listens. With an approach of learning through English, like that of the General English series, there will always be an element of listening skills being a byproduct and happening automatically. But that is not a bad thing, and it's also unavoidable. How can your listening skills not improve during a speaking or vocabulary class? And you, the teacher, will be providing a constant example of connected speech when you communicate with the students. You, however, should not be the only example the students have. Exposure to a range of accents or even just different voices can be extremely beneficial for learners. Students often feel safe listening to the voice of a teacher, and when an audio clip is played in class, they panic immediately, thinking they won't understand. The listening skills tasks in the General English series are recorded by native speakers with a variety of accents. The language is graded and clear, but natural. The session on World Englishes will discuss this further, but you should encourage students to listen to a variety of different accents, both native and non-native, so that they can have the opportunity to notice features of pronunciation, fluency, and connected speech. The growing use of technology for communication and leisure time means that individuals who want to be active participants in society and effective communicators need to develop a high level of proficiency in listening. It is therefore important to consider how classroom activities can prepare learners for the kinds of listening purposes and situations they could meet outside class, and how they can develop confidence in dealing with authentic spoken English. Think back to your ideas about why we need listening skills, or the reasons why we listen. Jeremy Harmer identifies 6. Listening to confirm expectations. This would employ a top-down approach of using your knowledge of a situation to anticipate information. Listening to extract specific information. In other words, listening for specific vocabulary or key words that will indicate the information you need. Listening for communicative tasks, possibly to replicate and retell information so you can speak to someone else about what you heard. Listening for general understanding. You may also call this gist, like in reading. Listening to recognise function, like advice, suggestions or others. And finally, to deduce meaning. All these things listed will be affected by whether the listening is visual or non-visual. For example, can you see the speaker in person or on TV? Or are you speaking on the phone or listening to a podcast? Similarly, they will be affected by whether the listening is reciprocal or non-reciprocal. In other words, is the listener able to participate or not? As with reading, the listening process can be broken down into top-down processing and bottom-up processing. Top-down processing is done with the knowledge that a listener brings to a situation, inferring meaning from contextual clues and making links between the spoken message and prior knowledge. This prior knowledge is known as schemata and could take several forms. It could be knowledge of a topic or knowledge of a situation or context. For example, if you attend a lecture, then you already have some interest in the topic, maybe some background knowledge, and will be prepared for topic vocabulary. Whereas someone talking to a group in a museum, we would presume is a tour guide and can follow information using the context. We can further split schemata up into formal and content. An example of formal schemata would be the lecture situation. Our knowledge of lectures helps us manage our expectations of how the listening will be organised. There'll be an introduction, an overview, the main body of the lecture, and a roundup or summary to finish. An example of content schemata would be the script and sequence of events you would expect at a restaurant. After looking at the menu, the waiter will probably ask you what you'd like to drink, then come back and take a food order, then check if your meal is okay, and so on. This may require some socio-cultural knowledge, and there may be times when you trip up because of cultural differences. But the situations in the GES are in an international setting, so there should not be major problems. Bottom-up processing is done by using our knowledge of language to make sense of the sounds that speech presents to us. We use acoustic signals to try to comprehend the meaning. We use whatever clues are available to infer meaning. Clues include stress and speed, which are likely to be relatively consistent in most contexts. For example, stressing important words, pausing for effect or emphasis, or faster pace during digressions. Our lexical knowledge and gesticulation, such as facial expressions, walking, or hand gestures. For example, we know that the speaker turning their palms to the ceiling and shrugging their shoulders indicates they don't know something. For bottom-up processing in particular, the teacher is a vital resource. They are the model, so their confidence and competence is key to the learning environment. Access to tape scripts is also a useful resource for bottom-up processing. It encourages students to notice, analyse, and learn chunks of language, and is also an opportunity for them to self-evaluate. This is something they can do outside of lesson time too. Tape scripts for all listening exercises are accessible to teachers and students on the app. When learning, the student will be using a combination of both processes, They will be applying a large amount of top-down processing by using the topic and vocabulary they already know to communicate in English. But with any form of education, the student is there to learn something. So we'll need to apply bottom-up processing too. You, as the teacher, can help students with their passive listening skills in particular by ensuring that you exploit situations in the classroom to familiarise your students with things like functional language, such as offers, suggestions and advice, or sounds in connected speech when speaking at a natural speed. For example, contractions like I'd like instead of I would like, and what'd you do instead of what did you do? And also use intonation to make meaning clear, like a falling tone for new information, and when you are finished, and a rising tone for known information. For listening tasks in class, normal procedure follows the pre, while and post approach taken in reading activities. Most teachers will probably do the pre-listening stage without even realising. In the same way we do a warmer for a whole lesson. Each task requires its own form of warmer too. At the pre-listening stage, learners will need to tune in to the context and the topic. An important objective for the pre-listening phase is to contextualise the text, providing any information needed to help learners appreciate the setting and the upcoming task. As mentioned in earlier sessions, Imperial English courses take a topic-based and integrated skills approach. So the pre-listening could actually be in the form of an early speaking task in the topic, encouraging students to form opinions and activate schemata. Here is an example of a lesson that includes a pre, while and post-listening approach. The pre-listening part actually starts with task 1. The speaking task encourages students to discuss the features of a good presentation. This gets the class on topic and activates the schemata. Depending on your preference as a teacher and the ability of the class, you may also want to introduce task 2 with some more pre-listening. You could ask students to scan the questions first, predict answers and make notes before playing the audio. Obviously, the while listening activities need to link in a relevant way to the pre-listening work. You need to have established a purpose for listening that involves the learners and encourages them to engage or attend to the text intensively or extensively. Each level of the General English series grades listening activities so that learners can develop their skills effectively. Having a task that is too long or difficult in the earlier topics or levels can cause anxiety and demotivate learners. For those of you familiar with the IELTS exam, you may notice throughout the course that some listening tasks resemble the exam. This is because it is such a widely accepted English language test for higher education and immigration to English-speaking countries. Imperial English has also developed an IELTS training app that students may be also interested in. Using the same topics and tasks as an example, you can see that students need to write down phrases that they hear while the audio is playing. It is simplified slightly as the presentation is broken down into sections and the text is played more than once. Post-listening activities can take students into a more intensive phase of study and offer the opportunity to do further analysis of the text, either in terms of topic or discussion, but also in terms of language and grammar, which involve aspects of bottom-up processing. These activities can also involve integration with other skills through development of the topic into reading, speaking or writing activities. We mentioned earlier that students and teachers have access to listening tape scripts on the app. This should not be ignored. Analysis of tape scripts, either in class or during self-study, can help students notice and build chunks of language. The task that follows the pre and while listening examples from earlier is a vocabulary follow-up task. This focuses the students on formal and informal language and encourages them to analyse what they've just heard in order to categorise it. Several topics on the course end with student presentations or groups giving feedback on the discussion they have had. These activities are as much about listening as speaking. The listener needs to be active and respond to what they hear, either to express their opinion or give peer evaluation of classmates' performance in the presentations. The teacher needs to be a good listener too. Firstly, to note language errors or good examples of language use to give feedback on. And secondly, to be able to exploit student contributions to promote genuine interaction and discussion, which can involve the whole class. Remember that in the classroom management session, we pointed out that the IRF type of interaction that is often common in classrooms is not normal in everyday spoken communication. Listening is a good opportunity to imitate real life as much as possible. The teacher should show interest in what the learner wants to say and express, and not just focus on how they say it and how to correct it. Listening tasks on the app can be played individually by the students as an option. However, tasks can only be played twice. There is also a pause button. In this situation, teachers need to plan carefully as they need to be in control. Students must be clear on when they should press play and pause if you are drawing attention to specific features in the text. They will also need to bring headphones if the teacher wishes students to listen individually.
These are the hashtag words to take from this session. Write a short summary of the session using the hashtag words and examples where possible.